Welcome to In the Know News. Today, we're diving into the cold, hard truth. Why so many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and how you can escape the cycle. We'll uncover eye-opening stats, reveal hidden habits holding you back, and share actionable tips to build real financial stability. Ready to take control of your cash flow and start building a brighter future? Let's get into it.
Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about something that's been in the news a lot lately, and it's something that I think affects a lot of us in different ways, and that is living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is a big one, and I think it can be a really sensitive topic.
For sure.
But I think it's really important to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think it's something that a lot of people experience
Yeah.
and don't necessarily talk about,
All
and
right.
it can be helpful to kind of unpack it.
Exactly, and we're going to do that today with some really interesting research and articles that you sent over.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff.
Yeah.
We got some Bank of America data.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a study from Payroll.org, and then we even have some personal finance advice sprinkled in.
Yeah, I love that because it's one thing to look at like the hard numbers and the data,
Right.
but then it's like, okay, well, what do we do with that information?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do we actually apply this to our lives?
Exactly.
So hopefully we can connect those dots.
Awesome. I'm excited to dive in.
Me too.
So why don't we start by kind of defining what paycheck to paycheck even means?
Yeah, that's a great place to start because one of the articles actually calls it a nebulous term.
Right.
And I think that's very accurate. It's not always about having $0 in your bank account.
Right.
It's this feeling of vulnerability.
Exactly. Yeah, like
true.
you're one unexpected bill away
Exactly.
from being in real trouble.
One car repair,
Yeah.
one medical bill.
And speaking of trouble, that Payroll.org survey had a really startling statistic
Oh, yeah.
that 77% of Americans would face financial difficulty if their paycheck was delayed by a week.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's a huge number.
It is a huge number.
And I think it really highlights how many people are really living close to the edge.
Yeah. And so to get even more specific, the Bank of America study uses a data-driven approach.
Okay.
And they analyze households where 95% of their income is going toward necessities.
Okay.
So this is housing, food, childcare, all the essential.
Way out of things you can't really cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So they're looking at the folks that have very little wiggle room in their budgets.
Right.
What did they find when they applied that definition?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. In 2024, over a quarter of all U.S. households
Wow.
fit that paycheck-to-paycheck definition.
Okay.
And here's the even crazier part.
Okay.
That's actually an increase from 2019.
Wow, a quarter of all households?
Yeah.
Yeah, that number really stopped me in my tracks when I was reading that.
Yeah.
Because like, whoa, okay, this is a lot more widespread.
It's not a small problem.
Yeah.
It's a significant portion of the population.
Exactly. And did they find any patterns in terms of who is most likely to be in this situation?
Yeah, and this might surprise you, but they found that the proportion of paycheck-to-paycheck households actually rises with age.
Really?
And it peaks with baby boomers.
That is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, you would think as you get older, things would get more stable.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case.
So what could be driving that?
Well, it could be a few things. It could be rising healthcare costs,
Sure.
which hit older generations harder, and then many boomers might be on fixed incomes,
Right.
while also potentially supporting family members.
Yeah, okay. So it's like a double whammy for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, interesting. So it challenges like the stereotype of who is struggling financially.
Right. It's not just a young person's problem.
Right.
It's across the board.
Yeah, what about location?
Location definitely plays a role, too.
Okay.
The study found that some southern states have the highest concentrations of these households,
Interesting.
particularly in the South Atlantic division.
Okay, so we're starting to paint a picture of who and where,
Yeah,
but the million-dollar question is why?
right. Why is this happening?
Is this just bad budgeting, or are there bigger forces at play?
It's usually not that simple.
Right.
The data shows that paycheck-to-paycheck households have over 90% higher necessary spending
All right.
compared to other households. So this points to things like life cycle factors,
Right.
young families, high housing costs,
Yeah.
things that eat up a lot of your income.
Right, and this whole rising living costs thing really hit me when
Ah.
I was reading the Payroll.org survey,
Mm-hmm.
because respondents were saying that even a 1-week paycheck delay would be a hardship.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's not always about lattes and vacations.
Right.
It's about keeping a roof over your head.
Exactly. And it shows how precarious things are for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Even a small disruption
Yeah.
can throw everything off
Right.
completely.
Wow. Okay. So we're getting a much better understanding of the why.
Yeah.
But that leaves us with this big question.
Of course.
Can this cycle be broken?
Right. Because we don't just want to define the problem.
That's
We
it.
want to
No.
find solutions.
Right. And that's where part 2 will take us.
Exactly. We'll dive into some strategies for breaking free. So can this cycle be broken?
Oh.
I think the good news is yes, there are ways to break free.
Okay.
It's not about getting rich quick. It's about building a solid foundation, step by step.
That's reassuring to hear. I'm ready to dive into some strategies.
Okay.
I know we've got advice from Ramit Sethi. We've got Quicken, a couple other sources. So where do we even begin?
Let's start with budgeting.
Okay.
I know everyone's probably heard that before.
Yeah.
But these sources offer a fresh perspective.
Okay.
Ramit Sethi talks about a conscious spending plan, which focuses on aligning your spending with what truly matters to you.
Okay, that's so much better than like the restrictive budgets I've tried in the past.
Right.
Where it's just like deprivation, this sounds more intentional.
Exactly. It's about being mindful about where your money's going.
What other budgeting tips stood out to you?
Quicken emphasizes the importance of eliminating high-interest debt.
Okay.
Those interest rates can be a real drag, and
Yeah.
they keep you stuck in that cycle of
It's
payments.
like you're dragging this anchor of debt around,
Exactly.
making every financial step that much harder.
It weighs you down.
Yeah, so get that budget in place. Tackle the debt. What else should we be thinking about?
Bernadette Joy, who's a financial coach, has this great concept called a cash flow cushion.
Okay.
It's basically a buffer in your checking account, enough to cover a month's worth of expenses.
That cash flow cushion sounds great in theory,
Mm-hmm.
but I can already imagine people listening to this and say, well, that's easier said than done
Right.
when you're already stretched so thin.
Yeah, and I would say it's about shifting your mindset.
Okay.
It's not about having a ton of extra cash right away. It's
Yeah.
about gradually building that cushion
Sure.
over time. Even starting with a small amount
Oh.
can make a big difference psychologically.
Get that peace of mind,
Exactly.
knowing you can handle a surprise expense
Right.
without going into panic mode.
You're not reaching for the credit card.
Exactly.
I love that.
What other gems did you find in these sources?
Ramsey Solutions is all about the power of side hustles.
Okay.
In this economy, having multiple income streams
Yeah.
can be a real game changer.
Yeah, we've all heard about the side hustle boom.
Right.
But what I thought was really interesting about these sources
Yeah.
is how they dug into how impactful that extra income can be,
Absolutely.
especially for things like tackling debt or building that cash flow cushion.
Right. You can really accelerate your progress.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a chore.
Yeah.
It could be something you're passionate about.
That's the best case scenario.
Right. Find something you enjoy doing
Right.
and make some extra money on the side.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is how these strategies connect.
Oh, how so?
A side hustle can help you build that cash flow cushion,
Okay.
which reduces your reliance on credit card,
Mm-hmm.
which helps you get out of debt faster,
Right.
which frees up more money to pursue your goals.
Yeah.
It's a positive feedback loop.
It's like they all work together
Yeah.
to create this more stable foundation.
Exactly.
But it's not just about implementing these tactics once and then forgetting about them, is it?
No, you're absolutely right.
No.
The real key is consistency. Building a strong financial foundation is a long game.
Mm.
Ramit Sethi and Bernadette Joy both emphasize this.
Okay.
It's about sustainable habits,
Right.
not chasing quick fixes.
Like building any other kind of strength.
Exactly.
It takes time, effort, dedication to see real results.
Consistency is key.
Okay, so we've outlined some really practical steps
Mhm.
for individuals, but let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
If a quarter of all households are in this paycheck to paycheck situation,
Right.
could it be a symptom of something bigger?
That's a great question.
Yeah, like a larger economic issue?
It's definitely something to consider,
Yeah.
especially when you see how many people are struggling
Mhm.
despite their best efforts to budget,
Yeah.
earn extra income, manage their finances responsibly.
So it's not just about personal choices.
Right. It might be bigger forces at play
Okay.
that are making it harder for people to achieve financial stability.
Wow. Okay, so we've gone from defining what paycheck to paycheck even means
Mhm.
to looking at who's affected, where it's most prevalent.
Right.
And now we're starting to think about this on a much larger scale.
A systemic level.
Yeah, and we're going to explore that thought-provoking question
Absolutely.
in part 3 of our deep dive.
So we were talking about how Paycheck to paycheck living might be more than just personal choices.
Right. Like, is this a sign of a bigger economic problem?
Exactly. And I think one of the things that stood out to me from the Bank of America data
Mm-hmm.
was that while necessity spending has increased for most households,
Okay.
it's increased way more for those paycheck to paycheck households.
So, like, the cost of just getting by.
Yeah, the essentials like housing, food, transportation, healthcare,
Right, right.
those costs are rising at a much faster rate.
And the other thing I keep thinking about is that statistic from Payroll.org,
Oh, yeah.
where 77% of Americans would be in trouble if their paycheck was delayed a week.
Right. And that's across all income levels.
It is. It is.
So it's not just low income earners, it's middle income, high income.
So if so many people are on that edge, even those with higher incomes, what does that tell us?
Well, I think it suggests that wages might not be keeping up with the cost of living.
Right. So even if people are making more money,
Mm-hmm.
those gains are being eaten up by these rising expenses.
Exactly. And that could be a sign of some deeper economic issues.
It's like we're all on this treadmill, and even if we're running faster,
Mm-hmm.
we're not actually getting ahead.
We're just staying in place.
Right. And some people are even falling behind.
Exactly. And that's where I think this conversation needs to shift from just personal finance
Good.
to a broader economic discussion.
Yeah, because if it's not just about budgeting or side hustles, then what are the solutions?
Right. And I think that's where we start to look at things like policy changes.
Okay.
Things like increasing the minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
addressing the rising cost of housing.
And healthcare.
Yes, healthcare, education,
Yeah.
all these things
Yeah.
factor into the equation.
So this is really about creating a more supportive economic environment,
Exactly where everyone has a chance to thrive.
not just survive.
Right. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, this deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
Me too.
I feel like we've gone from this like really personal level of like, what does it mean to live paycheck to paycheck
Mm-hmm.
to now looking at this on a much broader scale.
And I think that's important because it helps us see the bigger picture.
Yeah, and hopefully start to think about solutions
Absolutely.
that go beyond just individual actions.
Right. We need a multifaceted approach.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add or any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think just to reiterate that financial struggles are often not a reflection of personal failings.
Mm-hmm.
There are larger forces at play, and seeking help and support is not a sign of weakness.
Yeah, I think that's so important to remember.
It's about taking control of your situation.
And building a better future.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to In the Know News. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights that keep you informed and empowered. Got thoughts or tips of your own? Drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious and stay in the know.